benching Joe Flacco, but they'll be going to rookie Dylan Gabriel this week against.
To have Shedeur Sanders at number 3 to me feels like it's not about football. Or in a better position for you to see what you have than Joe Flacco.
What if I told you that 1 year ago, Shedeur Sanders was projected to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft? What if I told you his own father essentially tanked his draft stock by threatening to pull an Eli Manning? And what if I told you right now as I'm recording this, Lamar Jackson is injured and sitting out week 5? Meaning that if Shedeur Sanders had just swallowed his pride and let the Baltimore Ravens draft him, he might be starting an NFL game this weekend with Zay Flowers and DeAndre Hopkins to throw the football to, and Derrick Henry standing behind him whenever he's about to snap the ball. Instead, he's the 3rd string quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, watching from the sideline with a headset, looking absolutely miserable as Dylan Gabriel was just named the starting quarterback for week 5. And to be honest, Shedeur Sanders' response to all this kind of rationalizes why teams didn't take him to begin with.
Vocally, anything to say? I guess. What can you say?
Get your ass in the front row and study and do all that. This kid talks, he runs his mouth like I could be a starting quarterback with his arms crossed like this. You got the talent to be the quarterback. You should be embarrassed that you're not the quarterback now.
So this is the story of how Shedeur and his father Dion completely torpedoed what could have been a promising NFL career. And honestly, they have no one to blame but themselves. So real quick, before we dive into this bizarre story, this video is sponsored. I just swept Monday Night Football, making over $500 off of 3 plays. And a lot of my Instagram followers have been raking in a ton of money as well. I mean, just look at my DMs, guys. Now, if you haven't signed up for Prize Picks, make sure you use my promo code Mikerophone to get $50 in lineups when you make a play of $5 or more. And for Thursday Night Football, this is what I'm thinking of running with. I got Christian McCaffrey going over 39.5 rush yards. Devontae Adams has been finding the end zone each and every game this week, so I have him doing that once again against San Francisco. And I have Puka Nacua going for 70 receiving yards at least. If all 3 of these hit, my $50 would turn into $150. I give away a lot of picks on my Instagram story, and I also have a partnership with Fantasy Aces. The link to that's in the description down below. We've been hitting so much as a result of that Discord community. If you want to check them out, check out the WAP link in the description down below. And thank you, Prize Picks, for sponsoring today's video. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Let's rewind to March of 2024. Shedeur Sanders is coming off of a solid junior season at Colorado. He's being mocked as a first-round pick by a million different draft analysts. I mean, hell, a lot of individuals thought he was the top quarterback in the draft, which explains why Mel Kiper crashed out so much during the draft when he wasn't selected in the first 5 rounds.
I think it's disgusting. I don't understand what the heck's going on with this. 5th player on my board, other quarterbacks being taken who aren't as good as Shedeur. Outside of not being have the rocket arm and the 4.6 speed and a big frame, what is he lacking?
A huge reason for this is because of how his father approached the draft. Dion goes on the $1 Million Worth of Game podcast and drops this bomb.
Okay, but I know where I want them to go. So there's certain cities that ain't gonna happen. It's not, I'm sorry, it's gonna be an Eli.
Now, for those of you guys who don't know, pulling an Eli refers to when Eli Manning refused to play for the San Diego Chargers after they drafted him 1st overall in 2004, forcing a trade to the New York Giants. Dion was basically telling NFL teams that my son is going to dictate where he goes, and if you draft him and we don't like you, we're going to cause problems. Now, think about this from an NFL team's perspective. You're a general manager. You've got maybe 5 years to build a winner before you get fired. Do you really want to use your 1st-round pick on a quarterback whose Hall of Fame father is already threatening to interfere if you're not on his approved list? I mean, there's a reason why the Browns draft room looked very anticlimactic after they drafted Shedeur to begin with. Now, according to former NFL quarterback Chase Daniel on the Scoop City podcast, this comment absolutely rubbed NFL teams the wrong way. He said, and I quote, "Do you think that went over well in draft rooms? Like, we don't have to have hot takes. This is just pure, simply stated facts." But it gets worse, way worse. Fast forward to the 2020 2025 NFL Combine, this is where prospects meet with teams, show off their skills, and most importantly, prove that they're mature enough to handle being a professional. According to Tom Pelissero, one longtime NFL assistant coach called Shedeur's formal interview the worst formal interview I've ever been in my life. He's so entitled, and of course, in my previous videos, I used this clip to prove the fact that he comes off as entitled.
If you ain't trying to change the franchise or the coach, then don't give me.
Guys, let that sink in for a second. This is the worst formal interview this coach has ever experienced. Could you imagine how many interviews this man has given throughout his entire career? He's been in the NFL for years. He's probably interviewed hundreds of prospects. NFL insider Josina Anderson reported that a quarterback's coach from a team drafting in the top 7 called Shedeur arrogant and brash during his interview at the Combine. And according to CBS Sports' Jonathan Jones, sources told him that Shedeur more or less sandbagged interviews with teams that he didn't want to draft him. And he did not give it his all during meetings, which definitely rubbed some teams the wrong way. Could you think about that strategy for a second? You're trying to convince 32 teams that you're worth a first-round investment, millions of dollars, years of developmental resources, the future of a franchise, and your game plan is to intentionally bomb interviews with teams that you don't like? That's not confidence, that's not being selective, that's career suicide. Now, let me give you some context from our last video to catch everyone up. The Baltimore Ravens were planning to take Shedeur Sanders with the 141st pick in the 5th round of the NFL draft. Now, I want you to understand, whenever you drop from the 1st round to the 5th round, teams are no longer looking at you as a potential starter. Nobody intentionally takes their starting quarterback in the 5th round of the NFL draft. By the time you get to the 5th round, you're either a developmental QB or maybe a backup QB. That is what you should be hoping for. And luckily for Shedeur Sanders, he had the opportunity to be a backup quarterback. The Baltimore Ravens wanted to select him with the 141st pick, but when he found out, he sent word back that he didn't want to go there because he'd be stuck behind Lamar Jackson. So instead, he ended up going to the Cleveland Browns 3 picks later at 144. Shedeur's logic was he wanted an opportunity to play. He wanted to compete for a starting job because, and I'm not making this up, he thought a 5th round pick deserved a legitimate chance to start immediately. And Alex Smith breaks down why this is so absurd.
This is insane. I think this is crazy. At this point, you're in the 5th round. I understand you had higher hopes, but you've dropped to the 5th round and you're thinking about being a starting quarterback the next year. I think this is incredibly short-sighted. Like, if you're in this situation, you want to go to an organization that is going to develop you. Here you have the Baltimore Ravens, the model of stability in the NFL. This regime's been together for how many decades now? And actually has a track record to develop quarterbacks. Joe Flacco, Lamar. Instead, you choose the Cleveland Browns because you think you have a chance to start the next year. And mind you, the Cleveland Browns, who are on the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to stability, right? This is the same organization that walked away from Baker Mayfield as the #1 pick in the draft. What's he gone on to do? Oh, he's only led the NFL in touchdown passes since joining the Bucs, right? This makes zero sense.
Let me repeat that. A 5th round quarterback, the 144th player taken in the draft, thought he was too good to learn from a 2-time MVP. You know what's hilarious? The Cleveland Browns absolutely crushed the 2025 NFL draft, while Shedeur Sanders has been rotting for the bench. Yeah, the trade down to number 5 to select Mason Graham was controversial, but so far, they made out like bandits in that trade. Mason Graham has been solid at defensive tackle, but that trade netted them an extra 1st round pick from the lowly Jacksonville Jaguars in 2026 and an additional 2nd round pick in 2025. And they crushed the 2nd round in this draft. I mean, linebacker Carson Schwessinger, who they took at 33, currently has an 84.1 overall grade from Pro Football Focus, ranking him 10th out of 131 linebackers. In his debut against the Bengals, he earned a 90 defensive grade from PFF and was the 2nd highest graded defensive rookie in week 1. Former NFL GM Ron Carthen said that Schwessinger is instinctive. He's going to lead the Browns in tackles. He and Will Johnson will be the 2 finalists for Defensive Rookie of the Year. I'm calling it. Quinshawn Judkins, their 2nd round pick at running back, leads all rookie running backs with 155 yards through the first 3 weeks, despite missing week 1. In week 3 against the Packers, the guy rushed for 94 yards and a touchdown, producing 34 rushing yards over expected, the 5th most in the entire NFL that week. He gained 87 yards after contact, meaning more than 92% of his rush yards came after beating the first defender. And I'm not done. Harold Fannin Jr., their 3rd round tight end, he's actually leading veteran David Njoku by 3 receptions and has 32 more yards on the season. Fannin led the Browns in next-gen stats separation rate in both week 1 and week 2 with an average separation distance of 3.11 and 3.19 yards respectively. That's almost a half yard more separation than Travis Kelce is averaging this season. The Browns are clearly building something. They're finding contributors all over their draft class. People who are actually producing on Sundays. Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders, he's not even running scout team.
I'm hearing Shedeur is not even running scout team.
Bailey Zappi, a practice squad quarterback, is getting reps over a 5th-round pick. But here's where the story gets absolutely perfect in its irony. On Wednesday, the Browns announced that Dillon Gabriel is going to be their new starting quarterback, replacing Joe Flacco. Dillon Gabriel, the guy the Browns drafted 50 picks before Shedeur in the 3rd round. Now, the craziest part is Shedeur Sanders' reaction to all this pretty much gives you an idea of why so many teams passed on him to begin with. The man was literally speechless.
Third quarterback.
And you know what the most brutal part of this whole story is? Lamar Jackson suffered a hamstring injury in week 4 against the Chiefs and is expected to miss week 5. Ravens head coach John Harbaugh said there was no way he was going to go back into the game and that the injury precluded it. If Shedeur had just gone to Baltimore, if he had just accepted being drafted by a legitimate Super Bowl contender, if he had just been willing to learn behind one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, he would be starting this Sunday. He'd have DeAndre Hopkins, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, and Zay Flowers to throw the football to. He'd have Derrick Henry to hand the football off to. Instead, Cooper Rush, Baltimore's backup, will likely get the start. And Shedeur, he'll be in London as the Browns' emergency 3rd-string quarterback, only able to enter the game if both Joe Flacco and Dillon Gabriel get injured. Now, for those of you guys that are saying, Mike, how could Shedeur have predicted that Lamar was going to get injured? Guys, with love and respect, this isn't something you should ever root for. You don't necessarily need to be a genius that a dual-threat quarterback is eventually going to get injured. I mean, since 2021, Lamar Jackson has only played in a complete season once, and that was last year. The man is a dual-threat quarterback, which means he's more likely to get hit than a pocket-passing quarterback, and the fact that he suffered a hamstring injury just makes things even more trickier. If Shedeur was in Baltimore right now, he'd have a legitimate path to playing time. Maybe not starting immediately, but at least getting opportunities when Lamar needs rest or deals with the inevitable injuries that come with his playing style. But no, Shedeur and Dion thought they knew better. They thought they could manipulate the process. They thought NFL teams would bow down to the Sanders name. And you know what NFL teams did instead? They called their bluff. A league source told Fox Sports that he's a good person, but people didn't like the personality. He's the biggest celebrity since Johnny Manziel to enter the draft. And we all know how the Johnny Manziel story ended. Look, I want to be fair here. The massive difference between Manziel and Sanders is the fact that Shedeur Sanders isn't a crippling drug addict. He's not a drinker. He's not a partier. By all accounts, he works hard and takes care of himself. But that almost makes this worse because Shedeur's downfall isn't because of off-field problems. It's not because he lacks talent. He completed 74.1% of his passes at Colorado in 2024, leading all of college football, throwing for 4,134 passing yards and 37 touchdowns. It's not even because of bad luck. It's because he let his ego write checks that his draft position couldn't cash. When you're a 5th-round pick, you don't get to demand anything. You don't get to pick your team. You don't get to sandbag interviews. You don't get to bypass opportunities to learn from great quarterbacks because you think you're above being a backup. 5th-round picks are supposed to be grateful for opportunities. They're supposed to outwork everyone. They're supposed to prove the 143 players drafted before them were all mistakes. Instead, Shedeur Sanders acted like he was Eli Manning, a guy who actually was the 1st overall pick and had the leverage to make demands. Dion eventually backed off of his pull at Eli comments when draft day got closer, saying, "I'm happy with any of the teams picking in the top 10. But by then, the damage was already done. Teams had already heard the message loud and clear. Draft Shedeur Sanders, and you're also drafting his father's opinions, his father's interference, and his father's media circus. Nobody wanted that headache. Not in the 1st round, not in the 2nd round, not in the 3rd round, and not even in the 4th round. Here's the cold hard truth. The Cleveland Browns are 1-3. Joe Flacco has been benched after completing just 58% of his passes for 815 yards with 2 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Their defense is spectacular, but their offense is anemic. They're desperate for any kind of spark at quarterback. And even in that situation, even with the team actively looking for answers at the position, Shedeur Sanders can't crack the lineup ahead of a 3rd-round rookie who everyone said was too small to play in the NFL. Dillon Gabriel's listed at 6 foot tall and 200 pounds. But look at the way he handles the media. Look at the humility and grace he takes this news with.
You wait for the perfect time, you know, you're gonna wait a whole lifetime. So for me, I'm just I've always been ready.
Gabriel spent 6 years in college playing for 3 different programs. He transferred, he adapted, he worked his way up. He finished with 18,722 career passing yards, second all-time among college quarterbacks, and 189 touchdowns, the most by any quarterback in FBS history. Gabriel has had to prove himself at every stop. He didn't have a Hall of Fame father making threats on podcasts. He didn't have the media attention. He didn't have millions of Instagram followers. All he had was his work ethic and his production. And now he's starting in the NFL while Shedeur watches. Now, some of you might be thinking, come on, it's only been 4 weeks. Shedeur can still turn this around. Can he though? Let's look at what needs to happen for Shedeur to actually get on the field. Gabriel is the starter. Flacco is the backup. Shedeur is third string. For Shedeur to play, both quarterbacks ahead of him would need to get hurt in the same game, or the Browns would need to completely give up on Gabriel after naming him the starter, which would make the organization look incompetent. Neither scenario is really likely. So what's Shedeur's path forward? Well, he's gonna spend the entire season on the bench, not developing, not getting reps, not building chemistry with teammates. Then in the 2026 offseason, the Browns probably draft another quarterback or sign a veteran, and Shedeur becomes a trade candidate or camp arm. Or worse, he becomes the next Brady Quinn, the next Johnny Manziel, another name on the long list of quarterbacks the Browns have wasted because they never got a real chance to develop. Except unlike those guys, Shedeur did this to himself. If Shedeur was in Baltimore, he would have spent the last month learning from one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in NFL history. He would have at least been getting scout team reps against the Ravens defense. He'd have been in quarterback meetings with one of the best offensive minds in football. And this week, he'd be preparing to start against the Houston Texans. Instead, he's flying to London to stand on the sideline and watch Dillon Gabriel play. I've said this before and I'll say it again. The Browns aren't good at developing quarterbacks. They're historically bad at it. Since 1999, they've started 39 different quarterbacks. That's an average of more than one per year. But you know what? Shedeur doesn't get to blame the Browns for this one. He chose Cleveland. He turned down Baltimore specifically because he wanted an opportunity to start. Well, here's his opportunity. Third string quarterback on a 1-3 team. Not even running the scout team. Watching from the sideline as another rookie who was drafted before him starts against the Vikings. Some opportunity.